Well, good evening, everybody. This session is being recorded, so later on this week or so, it will be on YouTube, as well as older versions of the Greenhouse Chat. Welcome, everybody. Dr. Mirza and I put on the Greenhouse Chat every 2 weeks. We thoroughly enjoy it. We bring different people to the table, who are of interest to the industry, and with that goes recommendations, from us or from the people who present to us. And we would really want you to make sure that you're using common sense when you adapt some of these methods or changes. We want to make sure that you use everything responsibly that is said here, because we share ideas, we give you advice, and we really hope that it works. But try it on a small scale, or try it for yourself first before you try it on a whole crop or on somebody else, or pass it on. Tonight we have Simon Lowen from TerraLink, and we'll start with him. And Simon also brought on board Dr. Matthew Krause. And I don't know who you would like to go first, Simon. Simon was going to talk to us about new methods of crop protection. He did this presentation during the Grower Day at the end of January at AGGA Greenhouses. But there was so much information there that we really asked him to repeat it. So Simon, I'll let you introduce your guest, and you decide who goes first.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Michael. Yeah, I think I see Matthew on the call. Hi, Matthew. Yeah. I will start. I'll do about 20 minutes and hopefully provide a nice segue for Matthew to continue on and introduce Lalaman Plant Care and some of their products. So I'm going to do a slight deviation from the presentation I did in January, Michael. I'll cover most of the same subject matter, but just to kind of inject a little bit of freshness to the talk, I'll add a couple other points as well. So what I'm going to talk about today is biopesticides as a category. So this would be kind of a subset of biological control. So I'm sure most of you, when you hear biologicals, the first thing you think of is beneficial insects, predators, parasitoids, that sort of thing. Biopesticides are, they're derived from natural organisms, from natural sources or organisms. So some similar modes of action, similar concepts, I guess, but what we're looking at here is specifically products that you would spray on the crop or drench into your substrate. And let me just
you could share it, your co-host, so if you want to share it something. Yeah.
Okay, we'll do that.
Good, we can see you.
Let me know if you see a presentation.
Yeah, you see it.
We are seeing it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So what are biopesticides? I just went over that very briefly. So some examples of this group of chemistries would be bacteria, fungi, viruses, and it's my perspective, and Dr. Mirza, Michael, I think you might agree with me. I know Matthew will. These products are integral to a comprehensive and successful IPM program in the greenhouse. So I'm going to cover kind of some general concepts around biopesticides, but also I'll mention some specific products and how they're being used in the greenhouse, what the mode of action looks like, that sort of thing. So I'm going to start off with a nice little video here of Bavaria bassiana mode of action here. So you can see it's a stink bug. This has been sprayed with Bavaria, and you have these spores will essentially land on the the surface of the insect. Hyphae will then penetrate the exoskeleton and essentially, release compounds inside the insect, which kills the insect from the inside out. Just a nice visualization of kind of how a fungal product like Bavaria or Metarhizium actually works compared to a conventional pesticide, which generally will target some metabolic pathway within the insect. So what are some benefits to biopesticides? There are quite a few. Low phytotoxicity is a big one, and that's not to say that there is zero phytotoxicity, and that's not to say that all synthetic products are highly phototoxic. Really, it's just generally speaking, biological products are easier on plants, less stressful. So that's a nice benefit. Reduced resistance potential is a big one. We see a lot of growers will struggle with controlling insects when they may have forgot to rotate between different chemical groups, and a lot of these conventional pesticides over time do the insects do become resistant to these chemistries. So it's much less likely to occur in bio pesticide products, just given the mode of action. You can imagine, from what we saw in that last slide, it's fairly difficult for an insect population to gain resistance and evolve some characteristic or phenotype that will protect it against a spore penetrating its cuticle, for example. So environmental safety is a big one as well. I'll briefly at the end of my slot here talk about the EWSA Protected Ag Stewardship Program, and that's a good example of what we're seeing in terms of a move towards environmental regulation, and generally speaking, biopesticides are much easier on the environment. Don't leave residues, and along with that, you have lower toxicity for humans, workers. So just generally easier products to work with, nicer products to work with, less PPE required, that sort of thing. So biopesticides are becoming much more popular globally, and there are a few reasons for that. We see, as I mentioned, regulatory changes. We see a lot more new registrations coming out on the biopesticide side of things. So and just a lot more research in this area that hadn't been done in the past. And we're learning a lot about these products, and we're seeing a lot of very interesting active ingredients and products come to market. So I'm going to run through a few examples of types of biopesticides. So I'm not necessarily highlighting any particular product here. I have an example product for each category, but really the idea is just to highlight how these products work and kind of the type of biopesticide, just to help familiarize people with these products. So trichoderma is a really common one. I'm sure most of you have heard of it, either in Asperello or Root Shield Plus. It's a really nice product. It's essentially, it works by competitive inhibition. So what we're doing is we're inoculating the media prior to pathogens being introduced in the system. So generally, as soon as you planted, you want to drench that trichoderma and let that colonize, and you're essentially excluding other harmful fungus from getting in there and taking that space and harming the plant. So there are also some biostimulant effects. Trichoderma releases auxins, peptides that help to promote root branching. So this next slide here is a nice visualization of that mode of action. don't worry about the acronyms here. Essentially, what you're seeing is an example of a pathogen, in this case, a Phytophthora, that is trying to infect the root zone. It's releasing a lot of these phytotoxic compounds, and you have a successful root shield or Aspergillo inoculation here that is mitigating that by providing or stimulating the release of protective compounds in the plant. So salicylic acid, jasmonic acid, ethylene is the example here of some of those beneficial compounds. So another group of biopesticides is bacillus. So this could be Bacillus thuringiensis, Bacillus subtilis, Bacillus amyloliquefactions. So there's quite a few different subspecies of Bacillus, and they all share what would be a common mode of action, I guess, in that they are fungicides. They're biofungicides. They can be either drenched into the root zone, providing protection against Pythium, Fusarium, very similarly to what we just saw with Trichoderma. They can also be applied to the plant as a foliar application, and that works for botrytis, that works for powdery mildew. Very, very popular products globally. There was actually a major shortage of Bacillus subtilis last year, just because global demand for this was so high. So really nice category of compounds there. It's a bacteria product, I should mention. A new one to the market, it's called Spear T. So this one is actually derived from it's an Australian funnel web spider. So it's a peptide essentially that targets very specific ion channels in the plant. And it's interesting because it sounds scary, right? Australian funnel web, neurotoxic compound, but really it's actually surprisingly extremely safe for humans and other mammals, just because that mode of action is so specific to plants and targeting that plant ion channel. So yeah, interesting new kind of class of chemistries here, which would be animal-derived peptides. So Regalia Max, this one's actually been on the market for, I want to say 4 years now, or thereabouts. This is actually a derivative, or an extract, I should say, of, I'm not going to try and pronounce the Latin name here, but it's a herbaceous perennial. And basically, I think they call it a knotweed, that I can pronounce. And essentially what this does is it stimulates the plant's natural defenses. So unlike a lot of other fungicides that will target the pathogen directly upon contact, this one actually, it kind of initiates or drives the plant's natural defense mechanisms. In this case, the systematic acquired resistance pathway, it's called SAR. All plants have this pathway, and yeah, it's just kind of a neat and unique mode of action from my perspective, that it's good to use in rotation with other fungicides, of course, but helps just increase the vigor and strength of your plant's immune system, essentially. So I talked about Bavaria earlier on. So Botanigard, Bioceres, Velifer would be some labels, some commercial labels for Bavaria bassiana products. The different labels are essentially just different, what's the word I'm looking for? Strains of Bavaria bassiana. So they're not all equivalent. They're very similar, but yeah, not all the same. And as I mentioned, the mode of action is a spore penetrating the exoskeleton. So you do have to make contact with the insect for Botanigard or other Bavaria products to be really effective. So I'm going to be very brief on this one, just because I'm going to give the opportunity for Matthew to talk about Lalgard and metarhizium. But this is another example analogous to Bavaria bassiana, and Matthew can correct me if I'm wrong there, but similar in a lot of ways. You may be familiar with the MET 52 EC label, which is the same active ingredient, but it's been relabeled. The formulation's been redone, and Lalaman's taken on that chemistry, and we're seeing a lot of nice feedback from the field since they've reformulated it. So I'll stop talking about it as much as I'd like to keep going, but I'll save some of that for Matthew. So how do we use these products effectively? Generally speaking, we want to be using these products preventatively. So I hope most of you are not waiting until your pest problem or your disease problem is at a point where it's out of control and unmanageable. I hope you're all doing some degree of scouting and monitoring your crop, using sticky traps, that sort of thing, to help you get ahead of these infestations and these outbreaks. Like I said, in general, we want to use these products preventatively. So that means applying when there's little or no observed pest pressure in the facility. Drenching your substrate with root shield would be a good example of this. We're not curatively treating Pythium when we drench root shield. We're really just inoculating it in a preventative fashion. So same thing goes with a lot of biopesticides, bioinsecticides, that sort of thing. Is really doing a weekly spray, for example, and just working to try and keep these populations from getting to a point where they can proliferate. I've mentioned media inoculation, so this could be with trichoderma, this could be with a bacillus, this could be with a streptomyces. Lalaman has a nice streptomyces product that can be drenched in vegetables. Essentially just strengthening your root zone. And I probably see the most crop damage from root disease, more than any other insect or pest, virus across the board. It's a very ubiquitous problem in Alberta, at least, and can be challenging to treat, especially if you're growing something like cannabis or strawberries, where you have very limited conventional curative products at your disposal. So all the more reason to really implement these products, integrate them into your program ahead of time, just to help you get ahead of these issues. Because Phytophthora and Pythium, this stuff is in your water source, and even if you're treating your water source, you're sanitizing with peroxide or chlorine dioxide or UV, it is a really nasty problem. And so I can't stress enough that using beneficial fungicides is just a really critical factor, or a strategy, and I recommend most growers, if not all, use some form of biofungicide product. Integration with conventional products, so this could be in the form of a tank mix. You'd be surprised, you can tank mix a lot of these products. So Botanigard would tank mix well with Avid, say, for example. You got to be careful as to what you tank mix and when you tank mix it. So if you have any questions, that's something. If you can't find the relevant information on a label, check with Dr. Mirza, check with myself. A lot of manufacturers will do their own internal testing and say, hey, these two products are tank mix compatible, these two products are not, and for the most part, we always recommend doing a jar test as well before doing a new tank mix. But a nice way to integrate some of these biological chemistries. It could also be a rotation partner. So yeah, if you're spraying palladium 1 week, you can spray Regalia Max the following week, and you're going to see a lot of benefit there, because these are obviously very, very different mode of actions. On the one hand, you have a systemic fungicide like palladium, and moving up through the plant, or translaminally through the leaf surface. And on the other hand, you have Regalia just boosting the plant's natural defenses. So really a kind of a 1-2 punch. A nice thing to consider in terms of just rotating different types of chemistries, different groups of products. I'm sure you're all well aware of unrooted cutting dips at this point. I think it's pretty common practice, but this is a nice example of how biopesticide products can be used preventatively. So it really quickly, in that dip recipe, you're using usually a Bavaria bassiana, you're using a trichoderma, you're using a nematode, Steinerderma feltiae, which is targeting fungus gnats, shorefly, and juvenile thrips. And a lot of growers are using a biostimulant like a hydrolyzed soy protein in that mix as well, just to help with the stress and help with rooting. So these are all natural products, and I'm sure many of you can attest to how effective these products are in terms of dealing with a lot of this contaminated plant material before it's able to get loose in your facility and get out of control. So one last comment. How do we frame the use of these products? So they do require a little bit more attention to detail than just spraying, mixing and spraying. There are some reasons for that. Like I mentioned, spear tea being a good example of specificity of action. So, you have to know that you have to make contact with that insect to get control. Application timing, certain insects are out at night versus the day, and if you do have to make contact, you want to make sure you're spraying them when they're actually active in the crop. Compatibility, I talked about. You probably wouldn't want to mix Botanigard with a fungicide, just because this is a fungal spore, and in some cases that's fine, but just a consideration, and just encourages you to be a bit more strategic in your application of these products. Shelf life, obviously, many of these products are only good for a year and a half. So, it takes a little bit more planning to know, okay, how much am I going to use? I can't just throw this in the cabinet for 3 years, that sort of thing. Environmental, pH. So this is not to discourage you from using these products. I don't want to be intimidating, but really it just takes a little bit more foresight, a little bit more planning for them to be as effective as maybe some of their synthetic cousins out there. So highly effective, but important to use them in the correct way. So if you do have any questions about how to use these products, that's what we're here for. So my contact's there. If you want to reach out before the end of the chat today, feel free to shoot me a message in the chat. We can follow up. And yeah, we want to be a resource for you at the AGGA, and Dr. Mirza is always a fantastic resource, and I'm sure it could help address any questions you might have about how to implement these products in your IPM program. So I'm going to quickly talk about the Protected Ag Stewardship Program here, just as a little bit reminder, as we're kind of sneaking up on summer here. So is your greenhouse business registered? If not, you will need to register if you want to buy a PCP product. PCP product is commercial pesticide, and that includes all the products I just mentioned. Those are, they are biological products, but they are commercially registered. They have a PCP number. Yeah, really, most pesticide products that you're using do have a PCP number. And what we would encourage you to do, if you have not already, is go to the AWSA website. I can give you a link if need be. And essentially, you need to register yourself either as category 1, meaning you do use a recirculation system, and you would have to apply for an audit on that recirculation system to make sure it is leak proof, or category 2, which is what most greenhouses are category 2, meaning drain to waste, meaning you're not capturing that fertigation solution. Essentially, what you're doing here is you're just saying, yes, I'm a category 2 operator. Here's my information. And with a few minutes of filling this out, you will get a waiver that you would then send to your PCP suppliers to add to your account. And that will give you access to PCP for, I believe, 5 years. Could be 3 if I'm remembering incorrectly, but that's the idea. We have until July to get that documentation on file, and at which point we will need it to sell you PCP. So just a reminder on that. If anyone has any questions, yeah, feel free to shoot me a message. We can talk about it. I can get you some info. It is fairly straightforward though, so I will leave it at that. I'll introduce Matt from Lalman Plant Care. And
hang on, Simon. Yeah. So have they extended it to July now? Because it was March at first.
Yeah, so it's June 30th is the deadline for category 1 operators and category 2 operators to have gone through that process that I just went through. And so that the category 1 operators don't necessarily have to have the audit complete by that time. They just have to have said, yes, I am a category 1 operator. They get a temporary certificate, and then you schedule an audit at some point. But it is June 30th is the official deadline.
Okay, because your poster says December 31st, which we know was extended. So I didn't know there was a new extension again, because it was 1st March.
Yes. So yeah, you can see on this slide here.
Canada.
Yeah, that's for category 1. I can double check to see if category 2 at this point need it. We are selling pesticides to growers who haven't submitted it yet at this time. So we're as a PCP supplier, we're giving growers until June to either submit their self-declaration or their audit. And I think that's fair, just given there wasn't a ton of notice with this program. And you know, we don't want growers to be panicking, especially in summer when pest and disease can be really bad. To be handcuffed and not have the ability to buy product would be not ideal. So that is it for me.
Thanks very much, Simon. I know that biopesticides are probably the wave of the future. There'll be pressure from governments to implement more and more of that, and like you said, there'll be more and more research done on it as well. So thanks. So we'll return it back to you, or you can introduce Dr. Matthew Krause.
Yeah, I'll quickly introduce Dr. Matthew Krause, and it looks like Scott Cassidy's on the call as well, also from Lalman. So I will let them jump in and take it from here.
Okay.
Okay, I'm trying to choose the right screen here. Sorry about that. And here we go. Okay.
We can see this, Matthew. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you seeing a full display, or are you seeing partial stuff?
Right now we're seeing multiple slides.
Multiple slides. Let's see if I can flip things around here so that you don't see that. Bear with me a second here. I'm used to using Teams, so this is kind of new.
Actually, it looks pretty good, full screen, and with this just a sidebar as well. So
yeah, okay. Well, that yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything that's like really small text or not. Let's see here. I've got too many things in the way on my screen at the moment. That's the problem. I'm operating, so I'm calling to you from Worcester, Ohio. at the moment. I normally live in Rochester, New York area, so I apologize for not getting this right here. Let me pause my share here for a second, and I will switch screens around. And we'll try it this way.
And maybe I can introduce myself briefly.
Yes, go right ahead there, Scott. Sorry about that.
So no worries. So my name is Scott Cassidy, and I am working with Malamon for almost 2 years now in the greenhouse. I'm a technical sales representative for greenhouse and nursery. I am Canada-wide representative, so I have recently just got back out from Alberta, meeting Simon Lowen for the first time back at the beginning of February, and I look forward to meeting more Albertan growers the next time around. So nice to meet everyone.
I assume I'm showing the multiple slides again.
No, it's good this time, Matthew.
No, it's perfect. Yeah.
Is it? Okay. Okay. Perfect. So thanks, Scott, for introducing yourself. I'm Matthew Krause, a Field Solutions Director for Controlled Environment, Agriculture, and Nursery. I'll just go ahead and get started here. So I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with L'Allemand Plant Care, but L'Allemand itself is a Canadian company. It was founded in Montreal back in towards the end of the 19th century. Where we really have our true foundation, and what you're going to be hearing more about today or this evening, are about microbes. We're all about microbes. What we produce really started back in the 1920s, first with yeasts for bread baking, and then throughout the years, we've added different business units, really again involving microbes that are for the agri-food industry, even pharmaceuticals, and even some of you who might be taking probiotics might be ingesting some of those that we produce just right outside of Montreal, that don't have the L'Allemand name on them, but if you're a particular pharmacy chain or vitamin supplement provider is selling probiotics, there's probably an 80% chance they will contain those that we produce for them. So Plant Care is one of the newer business units within L'Allemand. We have about 5,200 employees worldwide, really scattered all over the place except for the Arctic Circle and Antarctica, but you'll find us pretty much on every continent. Within Plant Care, we have a kind of a branding strategy, kind of a grouping strategy for all of our products. Most of what you're going to hear about this evening are in the protect category with biofungicides and bioinsecticides. Lalstop is our group of biofungicides. Lalgard is our group of bioinsecticides, but we have bionematicides, some bioherbicides, and even post-harvest biofungicides as well. But we're also very active in the outdoor spaces, not just in specialty agriculture, but also in broadacre crops like corn, wheat, soybeans, other pulses, canola, etc., with our grow category there of Lal Rise and Lal Fix. The Lal Fix are the nitrogen fixing bacteria, for instance. And then we also have what we consider the biostimulants like Lalstim Osmo, which is the only product that we have at the moment that is not directly from a microbe. It is actually part of a fermentation process, but it is a leftover. It's actually a a plant-derived material called glycine betaine, which you'll hear about later on. So you'll see how we distinguish all of the products within LolStop or LolGuard here in a moment. So as Simon mentioned before, those of you who ever used MET52 in the past, what you're getting with LolGuard M52 is pretty much the same. And while actually Simon was partially correct, we really didn't change the formulations. We improved the production of the active ingredient, which is a fungus called Metarhizium bruneum, strain F52. We kind of worked the kinks out of production of that particular organism, which is a very, very, very difficult fungus to grow. And our predecessors with MET52 had tremendous difficulty growing it, and therefore there were periods of time where it was in short supply, and it angered a lot of growers because it wasn't available. But really, the formulation hasn't changed. How we assemble the formulation has, but the formulation itself hasn't. LolGuard M52 OD is the old MET52 EC. So it is a liquid product. It is one of the few products that we sell that you have to worry about phytotoxicity if you use too high of a rate, because it has an oil in the formulation. It doesn't have anything to do with the active ingredient, it has to do with the oil in the formulation. So I'll talk about some limits that we would like growers to kind of respect when they use this product. But it's quite effective against whitefly, thrips, mites, and aphids. It does have a 4-hour RAI and a 0-day pre-harvest interval. You can see that it's registered in multiple countries worldwide. It's been out for quite a few years on the market. It has a sister formulation called LolGuard M52 GR, which is OMRI listed as well. But this is really more for soil incorporation or top dressing and kind of scratching in to a growing medium surface. And that's really aimed at black vine weevil and thrips pupa. It has a 0-hour RAI and a 0-day PHI. And as you can see also, it's registered in multiple countries for the same purposes. Something worth mentioning for the OD formulation, it is not OMRI listed, and that has to do again with the oil in the formulation. It's not a chemical abstracts number material that is currently recognized by the National Organics Program in the US and the similar program in Canada as being approved for organic use. Quickly show you a neat little video here. Kind of narrate it for you. It's very similar to what you saw before with the BioSafe video, but in this case, when you spray, of course, you want to have a small droplet size so you get a good distribution of spores, but the spores need to land on the insect. They're not going to pick them up on their feet and whatever. It really has to hit the insect body. The spore germinates, grows inside the insect, inside the hemolymph, which is the blood system. And it actually colonizes the insect. It doesn't really produce any toxins in the insect. It's really just a sheer infection that takes place that then eventually clogs up the insect's innards or consumes organs and kills it. And it usually does it within a 3 to 5 day period of time once it has infected the insect.
I have to say, Matthew, your video is
Yes.
a lot higher quality than the one I showed.
We really have a crack team in marketing that actually understands some science too. So that's been quite a benefit. So we use it preventively, of course. Simon so eloquently described why it's important to use really any of the bio pesticides, whether they be biofungicides or bioinsecticides. You really want to get ahead of the problem, but there are times when you can't. And that's when you would bring in a chemical material, for instance, that does have, we all say curative, but most of the time they're really knockdown properties. You know, if they were truly curative, you'd apply them once and you'd never have to apply anything else again. And we all know that that's truly not the case. But regulatory authorities and the plant pathologists and entomologists had to come up with some way of describing those types of materials. So curative is about the best way we can refer to them. But at any rate, you really want to get ahead of the game, and that's where you can use products like Lolgard M52 OD, for instance, by applying really in the early growth stages of the product, and quite frankly, when you are just gearing up your macro beneficials, your beneficial insect program for in the late winter, early spring, when they're still kind of sluggish, this is a great opportunity to use Lolgard M52 to kind of get the ball rolling. So of course, good scouting is super important on that. And we believe in rotating with other effective bioinsecticides. So I would highly recommend Botanigard or Bioceres in that rotation, so that you're getting similar modes of action, but they're not occurring quite the same way. And there are always gaps with these microorganisms. They're not Swiss knives. They can't cover all the bases all the time, but together they work really beautifully together and usually have very low impact on your macro beneficials when you should bring them in. And of course, we also recommend for those growers that are using maybe more chemical pesticides or synthetic pesticides, using Lolgard M52 in rotation. But one thing I want to point out here, you see on your screen there, 1.5 liters per 1,000 liters. Even though we have a nice broad rate range on the label, which goes from 0.5 liter to 5 liters per 1,000 liters, we really recommend sticking with that 1.5 liters per 1,000 if you can. And the reason for that is that we don't want to run the risk of any phytotoxicity because of the oil on certain varieties of tomato, for instance. Some of the cherry tomato varieties tend to be very, very, very sensitive to oils. So treat it like you were applying another oil-based product like a Soft Oil X, or like Petro-Canada has its own really nice horticultural oil. Even though those are at higher concentrations, the point being that you just want to limit that. And we would even recommend that you give it kind of a break. Maybe if you're going to do multiple applications, 2 applications over a 2-week period of Lolgard M52 OD, that you break it up and do a wettable powder application of Bioceres, for instance, or Botanigard 22WP or Micatrol WPO as alternatives, just to break that up. Not so much for true phytotoxicity, because we really don't see it, but what we do see is really hampering water relations in the plant. So it really tends to mess with plants that have vapor deficit issues. So we're really trying to get around that and allow those stomates to keep opening and closing quite easily. So we do have quite a bit of compatibility with Lolgard M52 OD in particular. We should be careful not to tank mix it with anything for the moment. When we do gather some more information about tank mix compatibility, we will effectively change the label to allow for more of that. But for the time being, we're recommending it in rotation with other materials there, especially because of the risk of issues related to the oils. Here you can see some of the compatibility with macro beneficials. And we will be having some sheets being presented pretty soon on our website, showing you where we have compatibility versus where we don't, with predatory mites and parasitoids and predatory bugs as well. But when you are in doubt, you can always contact us or contact TerraLink, and we should be able to provide you with the right information regarding compatibility with macro beneficials. We do have rotational compatibility charts that we'll also be releasing soon. So saying when you can apply M52 with with some of the other more used foliar applied fungicides and insecticides. But getting back to the macro beneficials, when in doubt, what we usually recommend is applying the Logard M52 OD first, and then doing your releases after that, so that you don't have issues with the spores landing on your macro beneficials after you've released them. Some other Lallemand plant care products for greenhouse production. We have Mycostop, which many of you probably are already familiar with. It's primarily is for root disease suppression. So that could be anywhere from Fusarium or Pythium or Phytophthora, wilt and root diseases, to damping off diseases caused by Pythium. It is a Streptomyces strain, originally isolated from sphagnum peat moss in Finland, but it's been on the market for 35 years and still going strong. It's a very effective root colonizer. It's does a number of different things in addition to disease control, but what we really focus on are the disease control aspects. But it really operates off of the root system. It doesn't really grow nicely in the surrounding growing medium, because it's really more plant associated than soil associated. So it's important that when you do apply it, that you're applying it early in the crop, and that it's able to get in and start colonizing the roots as those roots continue to grow into the soil. What's really cool about it is it can actually start colonizing and be really highly active just at about 5.5 degrees Celsius soil temperature. So it's active very, very early on in the season, and can also be quite active even when soil temperatures or growing medium temperatures may be hotter in the summer, in the middle of the summer, for instance. It operates off of 3 different modes of action: competition for space and nutrients around the root system and on the root tips themselves; hyperparasitism, where it can actually colonize the pathogens, some of the pathogens that it encounters, like Pythium, for instance. And then, of course, it can also defend its own territory by the production of antagonistic metabolites. So it can actually inhibit pathogen growth around the root systems simply by producing enzymes and chelating agents, et cetera, that are very disruptive to certain pathogens in the soil. And each of those, as Simon mentioned, it's very difficult to get resistance to the biopesticides, the biofungicides, the bioinsecticides, because of the types of modes of action, and that they're not single site modes of action like some of our synthetic chemical counterparts. These don't rely specifically on disrupting biochemical pathways. Instead, they're more brute force, much like a dog going after a rabbit, for instance. It's very difficult to break that resistance. Something I wanted to also mention is that down the road, you'll see Mycostop will have a name change. It'll end up going to become Lalstop K61, but that's just to prepare you. You don't have to remember that. You'll see it advertised when it takes place. Then we move on to Pre-Stop, which is primarily directed for control of foliar diseases, but it does have effects against soil-borne diseases caused by Pythium, Rhizoctonia, and Phytophthora. And maybe some of you have also seen some of the papers and reports that Dr. Zamir Punja has put out in recent years, showing the benefits of using Pre-Stop and other products like it for control of root diseases on cannabis. And so this product is actually labeled for use on cannabis. But where its real forte is in the foliage is against botrytis, also against gummy stem blight caused by Dibumella. But it is also a fungus, not a bacterium, but a fungus called Clonostachys rosea that is also originally isolated in Finland. It's a little bit younger than Myco stuff, but quite an awesome product in and of itself. And it operates by 3 modes of action: antagonistic metabolites, competition, and then it actually preys on, not just parasitizes, but it'll actually fully consume pathogens. And an example would be rhizoctonia in the soil, as well as botrytis on the foliage. But it really does offer quite a bit of protection against major diseases that you would encounter in the greenhouse on greenhouse veg crops. And then we have some other products that are not falling into the plant protection category, but in the biostimulants, we have the Lalstim Osmo, which is 97% naturally derived glycine betaine, which is a natural osmoprotectant in the cell. That's one of the materials or compounds that's within, for instance, succulent plants, that keeps them from drying out in desert environments, for instance, or in arid climates. But it also helps to stimulate glycine betaine production and retention in the cell. It actually holds up in the vacuoles in the cell, and so it makes the plant cells less likely to give up moisture, less likely to give up water. And so that's what makes it also quite useful for not just for drought stress, but also preventing too much water from entering the cell and getting edemas and so on during very wet periods. But it's also quite helpful if your plant system is primed for dealing with colder periods in the late fall, winter, and early spring. But what we've also found is that can also help against certain nutrient deficiencies when it's combined with, let's say, for instance, foliar calcium applications. It allows the crops such as lettuce, for instance, to take up calcium better and thus reduce tip burn when you have warmer daytime temperatures and colder nighttime temperatures. And then the Lalrise products, Lalrise Vita, which is a Bacillus velazensis strain, not for disease control, but actually for solubilizing nutrients. Some of you may already be using some organic phosphorus, for instance, in your production, and this would allow that phosphorus to be solubilized much more quickly. But it also enhances fibrous root structure, not just root branching, so that you actually have more root surface area to take up nutrients and extract water out of soils and growing media. And then there's Lalrise Max, which is a mycorrhizal fungus. It's an endomycorrhizal fungus, so it grows inside the plant root, and it actually affords the plant not just the ability to take up phosphorus in a different way than the Bacillus velazensis, but it also extends the plant's root system without actually having to have the plant extend its root system. The fungus is acting as a supplemental root system as well, so it's able to acquire water, phosphorus, and other nutrients right out of that growing medium. It's not for all plants necessarily, and if you're spoon feeding nutrients, as you would be if you're growing greenhouse vegetables and using an A tank and a B tank, etc. But for more organic applications, it might be quite beneficial to use. And there's our contact information. I think email is probably the easiest way to get a hold of Scott or me. Should you have any questions, we could also visit you when we're in your area. I hate to say area because Alberta is huge, but I'm sure Simon, if you contact him as well, we would definitely be available down the road to talk more about what you're doing in your operations, and are there tools that we could offer to help in dealing with certain issues that maybe tend to be more troublesome, or at least you're looking for alternatives to maybe what you're doing now. So
Well, that is awesome. We have some questions in the chat here. I'll go to that. Where is it now? I lost it. Okay, so Beth wants to know something about powdery mildew. Which one's the best? Do you want to know which one the best one is for powdery mildew? What's the more depth of the question?
Simon had mentioned something about powdery mildew, and I'd stepped away and I came back at just the tail end when he was talking about one of his biopesticides and being preventative. How does that work?
Right, so it really depends on the compound in question. So one example would be the Regalia Max. That's preventative in that it's stimulating the plant's natural defense system. Bacillus subtilis, for example, like Rhapsody, essentially it colonizes the plant's surface and produces a whole bunch of antifungal compounds and essentially outcompetes the pathogen for space and nutrient before it has a chance to really set in.
It's the
So it has
with Rhapsody, Beth. I used to work for Bioworks, and we sold cease in Canada until Bayer decided to take it all back and go to the greenhouse with Rhapsody. But the majority of the activity with Rhapsody is really from the metabolites that are in the formulation. Those are actually they're biosurfactants, and they're pretty potent. So when you're putting those out on the leaf surface like that, that actually really truly helps to weaken the powdery mildew fungus down, and actually offers some protection to the leaf surface without damaging the leaf and without having to penetrate into the foliage or into the first cell layers of the plant. So just by laying that out is really nice. But the reason you have to continue reapplying that product is it doesn't spread. Actually, the bacterium isn't very competent on the leaf surface. It grows beautifully in the soil, but on a leaf, consider a leaf a desert when it comes to food and moisture, except during those really rough times when botrytis tends to go crazy. But by and large, you're getting a longer activity out of the biosurfactants that are in the Rhapsody. Are you familiar with Millstop?
Yes, we are pretty familiar
Yes.
with this.
Millstop is probably the only truly curative material for powdery mildew on the market. It's also considered a biopesticide, but it doesn't come from a microorganism. It comes from a mineral source. But it's both a curative and a preventive.
Sorry,
so
what
that
was the name?
offers a little bit differently. Yes.
What was the name you just said?
Millstop.
Millstop.
Milstop from Bioworks.
Potassium bicarbonate.
Yeah, it's and it has also some surfactants in it that also help weaken those cells too. So you've got the salts from the potassium bicarbonate, which if you're using it at the preventive rate or even the middle rate, you're actually going to have quite a good efficacy. And that could be tank mixed with, for instance, Rhapsody. Works beautifully.
And Beth has a follow-up question here. So do we apply it after we see the powdery mildew or before? I think a good answer would be preferably before, but after it is good too, right?
Yeah. I would use that for those growers that are using sulfur, and yet sulfur can be pretty nasty, especially sulfur pots can be pretty nasty on your beneficials. If you want a good alternative to sulfur for powdery mildew, it's a lot safer on the plant, a lot safer on the crop, and safer if you're using oil-based products to use potassium bicarbonate product like Millstop.
And again, you don't see any damage to any beneficial insects while it attacks funguses or in some cases, even other insects.
with the potassium bicarbonate or with the millstop,
With the
as long as
millstop,
you're
yeah.
using the low rates, the lower rates normally not. The surfactants in them do have some effect on soft-bodied insects, but only when you're using it at the top rate. But I would still rotate it and so on, and apply it when, for instance, your pollinators aren't out foraging, for instance.
And Laura, to your question about Rhapsody and Regalia being used as a drench as well as a foliar spray. So Rhapsody, yes, both. Regalia, no, it's only a foliar spray. And I'll jump back to Michael's question here at the beginning of the chat, because I think it's a really, really good question. And this actually came up at our grower seminar a few weeks ago. So Michael's asking, do the preventative spores attach to all the media types equally, or better to organic medias versus synthetic medias? And I think you're referring to trichoderma there, like a root shield asperello, Michael?
Yeah, I was, and you were talking about cocoa fiber and rock wool, and I'm going like,
yeah,
it is meant to attach to a organic material.
Yes, and I'll give my spiel on it, and maybe Matthew or Scott have something to add as well. But yes, the principle that generally speaking, these beneficials will colonize better in an organic substrate compared to synthetic is true, and there's a couple of reasons for that. So you do have more nutrient availability in an organic media like peat or soil, and even to some extent cocoa coir. You have more cation exchange capacity, so there's more calcium, magnesium, other cations there that these beneficials can kind of feed off on and proliferate. So long story short, they are still effective in a synthetic media like rock wool, but definitely more effective in an organic substrate. And so maybe that would influence how high of a rate you would use, and maybe how often you'd reapply. You might need to do more reapplications at a higher interval for an inert substrate like rock wool.
Yeah, the trichodermas. Is it Michael or Michiel?
Yeah, they say it's Michiel, but they say Michael here.
Ah, okay. It's very Dutch.
It sure is.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the trichodermas, like those that are found in Root Shield Plus, Trianum, and Asperello, they can actually survive on the lignin that's in sphagnum peat as well as in cocoa peat and coconut coir. So they can feed off of that and kind of hang on there for a little while. There's plenty of nitrogen that they're getting, so that's great. And then when they do encounter a pathogen or encounter a root, then they very easily can convert over to either root exudates from the root, or in the case of Rhizoctonia, for instance, can feed directly off of those pathogens. In rock wool, or clay balls, or perlite or vermiculite, some of them, and I will use my own experience with the Root Shield products, they can hang on for up to 5 weeks without germinating in those inert substrates, and which is really nice. But it depends upon the spore type. If they are a conidial spore, like what you have in the Root Shield products, they'll hang out for a long time. If they're a blastospore, which you can always ask the manufacturer, you can ask Plant Products or BioBest about the Asperello T34, but I think Trianum P is still a blastospore. So those have to germinate quickly. They have to find a food base very quickly. So unless there's a plant root there or something like that, they're not going to survive as long as maybe something like from Root Shield or potentially Asperello. But whereas the bacteria, they're more geared towards growing along the root system. themselves. So hope that helps.
It does, but it's quite interesting that the one type of spore can hang on to for as long as 5 weeks. That's great. And then once it's germinated, then it gives you still full protection for the full length of time.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Trianum and the Root Shield products, they can hang out easily for 8 to 12 weeks, depending upon the substrate, and then how long and disease pressure as well. If it's a cocoa peat, or if it's a sphagnum peat based material with bark or something like that, and they'll tend to be more of that 12 weeks. If it is a rock wool, I think 5 weeks is probably max without much plant growth. But if there's quite a bit of root growth and so on, it can be 8 or 10 weeks easily in those substrates. So, but that's the reason why you have to reapply. It's not that the population is gone completely, but what you're doing is you're bumping it back up again to an effective level.
Are you also reapplying because there's more root mass as the plant grows? Is that why you would have to reapply?
That's another good reason to do so. You know, when you're in a cocoa peat system or a rock wool system, and you're applying it to the block itself, it still has to move out. And depending upon the orientation of your fibers in rock wool, it still has to travel quite a bit if it's going horizontally in there. It's using those fibers for that, but it's also helping to stimulate the trichoderma that's already there. So it's kind of like refreshing the community, because those fungal cells they communicate with each other, just like the bacterial cells do. They actually use low molecular weight compounds to communicate and to actually stimulate that community again. So yeah, you're doing it for a number of reasons, but the biggest is to bring the population back up. There's a lot of competition in that environment of other microbes that are just there in your greenhouse, you know, and once they get in and they get established, they can start pushing around the non-native things. So that's another reason. So, but really just consult with the manufacturer or their guidelines or their best use practices, and they can usually indicate how often you need to reapply. Like for our mycostop, that's a product that you would reapply every 3 to 4 weeks, just to keep that population up and to get to the new root system that's there as it develops. When you're applying to the foliage, that's a different story. You've got, since those microbes don't spread throughout the rest of the plant, you're needing to hit the new tissue every week, so that you're getting that new tissue protected when you're looking at the biofungicides you would apply to the foliage. And that's super critical. But what's on there may last for weeks. The pre-stop will last for several weeks on where you've already applied it. So.
Very cool. Okay, was there any other questions in the chat, Simon, that you saw?
We covered most of them. So you did ask a question about droplet size, getting good coverage.
Yeah, how far does 1,000 liters go with 1.5 liters of product?
It depends on how much foliage you have.
I guess.
What we would recommend is that you spray to wet or glisten, but not to runoff.
Okay.
And you want to have a fine droplet size or smaller, because what you're essentially doing is throwing particles out there, right? Mm-hmm. And you want the particles to stick to the insect. And so the smaller the droplet size, the better.
Yeah, you need, like you said, you need to contact the insect, or or the spore, yeah.
Exactly. So you need to get inside the foliage as well. So you know how much it takes to get a good coverage within your greenhouse on your crop. So it's hard for us to say in a greenhouse how far 1.5 liters will go. It really depends upon the crop. I mean, on a strawberry crop, it goes a long way. On a high wire cucumber crop or tomato crop, or aubergine, like I have behind me here. It really depends upon how much leaf surface you have there, the volume of leaves that you have, and so on. So yeah, and your sprayer, how well calibrated your sprayer is, etc. Where you can use cold foggers, we would recommend that too for these types of products where you're trying to get out a small droplet, you know, with just a few spores in it, so that you can get as many hits on the insects as possible, even those that are flying. That's good too, but you have to check the labels of those types of products to see what they recommend or if it's even allowed. So
yeah, I was just going to ask, actually, you addressed my question before I asked. So safe to assume Lalgard is good to use in a cold fogger then?
Yeah, we'll consult with you on rates, etc. Cold fogger is okay. It's going to take a little bit larger volume of water than you would if you were using like a biopulse fog or something like that. We're currently evaluating the Lalgard M52 OD in the biopulse fog, but currently it doesn't allow for it on the label. But Botanigard has been used for years in cold foggers and track fog and whatever. Probably the best fogger support manufacturer with good support for foggers in Canada and the US is Dram. They know it, but they're partnering with Dr. Stahl and Sons from Germany, who really developed the whole greenhouse fogging system that the rest of the world is trying to replicate. So.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you, Matthew and Scott, for being our guests tonight. If you come back to Alberta, make sure it's in the summer, because winters can be nasty here, you know, driving conditions and snow. So we would welcome you back. You know, we have an annual conference in November that a lot of people will attend. You know, maybe even you know, as a product support for TerraLink, you know, in their booth or something like that. You know, we'd love to have you back.
That would be great.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that'd be wonderful.
Okay, Mirza,
Yeah.
you had a few slides to show us too about what came to your inbox this week.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, I'm just sharing it. So, okay.
Oh, before you get going, Loretta, are you there? Loretta? Loretta came to the greenhouse last week, and last week we had this discussion about the seeds that Shirley had, you know, that she didn't know what they were. And Loretta came to the greenhouse. She says, I couldn't log on, so I had to watch the YouTube video later on. And she says, I was literally screaming at the TV, at the computer, she says, because I know what those seeds were. So if Loretta's there, we'll let her tell you. Well, maybe she's not here. Let's see. I did think I saw her name.
I think I saw her sign off.
Oh, okay. Oh, there she is. It won't unmute. Okay, put in the chat what it is, because you need the credit for that, Loretta. I was thinking maybe I could unmute her, but Loretta. So it's a zinnia, but a zinnia is an annual and not fragrant and not a perennial. She was telling me that the zinnia seeds have a shell around them. So the way we get zinnia seeds is way different, because, you know, like marigolds are detailed, you know, zinnia is also a very large seed. But she said if you looked really close, then you could see the shells around the zinnia seed. So you know, so all our all our guesses were wrong. And because Loretta has planted raw seeds before, she knew it was zinnia.
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now, Loretta.
I don't know what was going on. I actually switched. I was on my phone earlier, so I switched to my computer because I can work it better. But yes, I've never seen a seed like that. That's not a zinnia. It has to be. The flower itself in that picture that was on last week also looked like a zinnia, even the dead flower. But it's not fragrant. And also they said it was purple. I've never seen a purple zinnia, although there's a dark rose pink one. It'd stake my life.
Yeah, but you really were able to recognize the the zinnia seed in its raw state with the outside shell around it.
Yes, and that inside is that small, kind of like a winged seed, little flat thing. So that's, in my opinion, that's what it is. I'm sure of it. I'd stake my life on it, actually.
Well, we won't do that. We need you around a little longer.
Yeah, I'll mute myself again.
Okay, so if Shirley is watching the YouTube video later on, then Shirley, there you go. But she's going to plant them and she's going to let us know, as they grow. So thank you very much, Loretta. Okay, Mirza.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Great presentation, Simon and Dr. Matthew. Ohio reminds me, Michael, you remember that Dr. Ray Sheldrake and many other people in Ohio are great friends for a long time. So it's nice to see a face when I recognize the scientists like Dr. Matthew there. It just reminds me. Great connection with Ohio. A lot of work they do with greenhouses. Thank you very much for sharing that. All right. I will quickly share a few questions which I got, few slides, and then a presentation on pH and EC. A question already coming up. A few questions on water quality, sodium issues, which we addressed in the last chat quite a bit. Water temperature, heating systems, root zone health. Watch for my article on root zone health in March-April issue of Greenhouse Canada. This is on the front page cover. I think once in a while, if they like my article, they make it a featured one as well. That's always nice. And other problem with the vegetable crops, surprisingly, only few this year compared to last year on berry plants. So maybe the weather is good, the climate is good, but we'll see what happens next by the next chat. Okay, let's see.
Oh, you have to back up one slide because there we go. Oh.
Okay, second one.
You have to back up to your granddaughter. There we go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So she is 10 months now. Learn to clap when happy. I wish adults could do that as well. Can crawl on stairs. I'm following her carefully. Have eaten all sorts of vegetables, including my grandfather greenhouse cucumber. It's just amazing. She eats good vegetable, and I know with the children, it's always tough to convince them these are good vegetables. Our mom is doing a great job, and she's enjoying her life. No hard work. Daily, she comes for 2-3 hours with us and play and sing, and so it's quite fun nowadays. So anybody on the chat who have grandchildren, enjoy them until they get to bigger, then they are gone. Okay, water temperature. What is the good recommendation? 18 to 20 degrees centigrade is my recommendation. How to heat incoming water? Instant hot water heaters, tankless. Know the GPM, need a mixing valve with cold water to get the proper temperature. So different options. Smaller growers have, say, 1,000-gallon tanks, so they could put some electric immersion heaters. I know in one of the chat last year, we went into quite a bit of details. Fuel, propane, natural gas, electric. Growers who have hot water boilers take a bypass and mix it with cold water and get the desired temperature. And blank painted storage tanks are pretty good. So they bring the cold water in from their well or other sources, lake water, and then leave it there for a couple of days so it gets a little more tepid. So not proper, it doesn't go to 18 degrees centigrade, but still the coldness is gone. 10 degrees centigrade is cold. 4 degrees centigrade is real cold. It affects the uptake of water through roots. Optimum root zone temperature is 18 to 20. When you see purple color leaves on tomatoes, petunias, pansies, that means the growing media temperature is around 14 degrees, and primarily due to cold water which has been used on them, unless they are sitting in the cold frame. Some growers use the cold water as a growth regulator for bedding plants. Last chat, we had a good discussion on this aspect as well. A few slides what came in. Fungus pythium on cucumber was devastating in a couple of situations. Look at the stems. The fungus pythium it could start with the base of the stem and with the roots, and then become very watery, and then somebody pinched the area. So that is so waterlogging is the biggest reason. In one of the chat, we have talked about that if they get waterlogged, a lot of algae develops there as well. Oxygen depletion is the main reason for the pythium to develop, 4 ppm and lower. And incidentally, some very nice, cheap, reasonable oxygen meters have come on Amazon. I have recommended for $143, pretty reliable one. They used to be over $1,000. So like a pH and EC meter, that should be your next investment, to have an oxygen meter, not only for your greenhouse water, in your drinking water as well. You could monitor the oxygen levels. Last chat, I shared a slide which is on the left side and my left. So that was plants had a very high EC of 7.8. pH was 5.7, because once you grow your seedling in rock wool, you give them some fertilizer, there's a lot of evaporation occurring from the surface of the rock wool. So the EC jumped quite a bit and the leaves were turning yellow. And look at on the right side there. So we leached them with about 800 ml per dripper, and lo and behold, they just recovered. And right now they're looking like this. So proper action at the proper time with proper diagnosis is important. And that's one of the purpose of chat, that a lot of information is giving, so that you don't suffer any economic loss. Good tomato cluster. These are the commercial crops. The cluster shape and angle provides good information on fruit load. A cluster like this, which is 45-degree angle, is a very good one. And the reason is that once it open, is far more accessible to pollinators. You know, your bumblebees could visit it so in nature, every 3 sets of leaves have a cluster developing on them. So watch for your commercial growing tomatoes. 45-degree angle is ideal. 3 sets of leaves and 1 cluster. If plants are weak, then first cluster can be removed. Fruit can be thinned to 4 to 5 fruits for better sizing. One question came in, twin heading of tomatoes. This is the recommendation which we follow. We start with the 2.5 plants per square meter. So then that is about 4.5 plant, 1 plant per 4.5 square feet. So right now, around middle of March, we allow a second shoot to develop, a strong shoot like you see here, where my cursor is, every 4th plant. So if on your rock wool slab, you have 4 plants, then 1 plant will be a twin-headed. That changes the density to 3.2 plants per square meter, and it increases the yield quite a bit. That's why we are achieving 70, 80 pounds per plant, which is 70 to 80 kilograms per square meter. And then this side shoot is removed when the lights start going down towards the end of August. So this question came in, and I did recommend an extra dripper because you have now changed the density, more number of shoots are there which need to be supported. A grower sent me this picture of cucumber. He was very worried that the tops are showing as if they are very together, not opening up. So when I checked their vapor pressure deficit, they were very high humidity, almost 90%. So plants will do that under high humidity condition. So we vented a little bit more and they recovered right away. Few pictures came in, stretched stems. So everybody has their own temperature requirement. Elongated internodes due to high difference in day and night temperature. That's we call diff. In the last chat, we talked about it, and they have to be supported with those canes here. This is a grower who does not support thick stems, so they are growing on their own. Proper spacing is the key. So, and that does affect your production later on. Space them early. Prefer more compact and spread out plants rather than vertical growing plants. When they are planted in the greenhouse under low light condition, by the time the first cluster is set, even if it's set, the plant will stretch to the string and there will be weak tomatoes there. Plant energy balance is better with strong stems and spread out leaves. As an example of that, thick stems, this is the time when they're ready for transplanting. So focus on the plants are more horizontal growing, not just the vertical growing. Early pH issues came to our attention. Attention here, tomatoes are showing, look at the pH was 4.95 and the EC was 0.71. So plants are starving. And this is typical pH issue, but also phosphorus deficiency will look like this on the lower leaves. So practically at 0.71, EC plants are just starving. And it's just such a low EC, pH on 4.95, then upper leaves could also be affected. You will notice here, these upper leaves are also being, toxicity occurs of iron and manganese in those plants. A magnesium deficiency came on one crop, so growers did not start feeding them. Some growers use some fertilizer like 20-10-20, 28-20, which have got, some have no magnesium in it. So the early deficiency of magnesium start coming in. So problem was corrected pretty quickly when we diagnosed what's going on. A few pictures of peppers came in, very vegetative plant. They are, when small growers have tomatoes on the side as well. So the look at the very long internodes on them, and fruit is also pretty as if loses water. You know, it has lost its integrity. So very fast growing plant, very vegetative with much cooler night temperature could cause those problems. So plant will recover, and that's always a challenge if you're growing small numbers, you know, for your farmers market and those sort of things. And leaves will get thick cell wall as well on them. A pepper grower sent me some pictures that he was worried with this one. I diagnosed it as a boron deficiency. He thought it could be an herbicide. Herbicide was not sprayed, but these plants were close to an area where he was working with in his workshop, doing some work with something where fumes came in. So this is possible, but we are watching it carefully. To me, it was more like a boron deficiency. It was more like a stunting at the top, bunchy top. So we are going to watch it. So always be careful what goes on around your workshop as well. At this slide I shared already, so I will skip that. Quite a few questions on pH and EC came, so I will quickly go through them. What is pH? How is pH measured? What is the practical importance of pH? What inputs affect pH? pH changes by the plant roots as they grow. Water pH affects it. How do fertilizer affect pH? Acidifying water supply. So few things quickly. I will browse through them. But remember that we have emphasized pH could be the major issue in bedding plants, in vegetable crops. Everything is good, but if the pH is not proper, nutrient uptake on pH on the alkaline side going over 6.2 will show iron and manganese deficiency top growth. At pH below 5.5, the toxicity of iron and manganese and boron and zinc could happen. And I'll show you a category of plots as well, which are more sensitive. Basically, pH is the hydrogen ion concentration versus hydroxyl. Hydrogen is everywhere, you know, the water is H2O. Once the water plot splits that water into hydrogen and oxygen, and that combines with carbon dioxide. So it's very fundamental to, in last chat, we did emphasize that equation. Acidity versus basicity, that's slightly different. Basicity is alkalinity, which depends on bicarbonates level. Very important for the uptake of nutrients. pH below 5.5, I mentioned that already. pH above 6.2 to 6. Even earlier, I've seen the problem where iron deficiency and manganese deficiency start taking place. So when a water test is taken, you see a measurement of total alkalinity expressed as sum of carbonates. So that's different than the pH. Carbonates, 1 carbon and 3 oxygen, CO3. Bicarbonate, HCO3. Amount of bicarbonate determine how much acid needs to be used to neutralize them to bring them to the proper pH. Quick one, just to emphasize, what do we talk about? 10 million. So if the pH is 7, there'll be 10 million hydrogen ion, and there'll be 10 million hydroxyl ion, OH we call it. When pH dropped to 6, hydrogen ion is 100 million. Hydroxyl drops to 1 million. pH 5, 1 billion. So as this is called logarithmic. So 10 million to 100 million is a logarithmic multiplication, you know. So it's not 10 plus 10, 20. And that's why the pH is difficult to adjust. So you have to monitor it early to correct it. pH 5, 1 billion, pH 4, 10 billion, pH 3, 100 billion. So if your pH is 5, you have to add far more potassium bicarbonate to bring it to the level of 7. So this is important. Difficult to make adjustment if, for example, the pH drop to 5. That's why monitoring and scouting is the key. So the amount and type of lime added in the growing media, that makes a difference. In one case, I remember some of the growing media we tested, they add enough lime there, dolomite lime, to guarantee a pH of 5. I don't know, companies are cutting down on lime, so they will say, this is the guarantee we give you. And that takes about 3 weeks to get to that pH. In one case, we measured 4.9, 4.5. So grower must watch the growing media using, even if they have been used for a long time, every batch could be different. Has to be monitored regularly. Watch the trends. Naturally, 500 different species of bedding plant, you just cannot monitor each plant. So I'll show you how to do it. Few categories could be established. Must have a supply of potassium bicarbonate handy. Always have a bag of potassium bicarbonate handy. I don't like I tell you to do that and you wait for them to come. Difficult to ship. It will take a few days to come. So by the time the damage is done, should know the pH sensitivity of crops you're growing. When a water test is taken, okay, bicarbonates are done. Oh, sorry. Okay. Making a pH curve, this is, I always suggest you make a pH curve. This is from Sandra a few years ago from Saskatchewan. She has kind enough to, she made this graph very high in bicarbonate. So it started with a pH of about 7.35. So on this side is pH of water. At the bottom is milliliter of diluted water acid ratio. In this case, 4 water, 1 acid diluted. And look at that. We added 1 mil, pH 7.18, 3 mil, 4 mils. And finally, it started dropping right here at about 18, 19 milliliter per liter. It started dropping. So pH from 5.24 to 4.98. So this is what the value of the pH curve is. You know, if all the bicarbonates are neutralized, your pH could go and it happened accidentally. I have seen crop damage if you don't have this pH curve. This is a very useful table. This will be in the chat. Category of Bacopa, they are iron, inefficient iron. So what happened is that if the pH start going over 6.2, iron deficiency occurs. Caliproca, same thing. Fuchsias, generally, they are in the middle. Geraniums are very efficient. So the moment the pH start going 5.5, the iron is absorbed more efficiently. They start showing damage. New Guinea impatient. So if you have two category of begonias, Bacopa, Caliproca, petunias in that category, you monitor them, they will be showing iron deficiency pretty quickly. The moment is 6.2, odd leaves will be for 6.5, sorry, 6.5, 6.2, 6.5. Definitely after 6.5, you will see the top becoming chlorotic. Geraniums 5.5 and below will have those problems. Petunias are like inefficient Bacopa, verbena also. So Bacopa, Caliproca, petunias, verbenas, they will, pansies that will show iron deficiency far more quicker. Testing it, make it a simple method. I like this method, just non-destructive. You take a pot, add enough water. There's no need to use distilled water because of the logarithmic nature of pH. You could use your regular waters, pH 7, doesn't matter. So you leach enough so that you could collect at the, here is a styrofoam plate and you check the pH. In this case, 5.13. Already on these geranium, speckling has started, which is iron toxicity, visible. So if you see there are small speckles, you know the pH has gone down on them. Yeah, just a close up of those tiny specks on them. So it looks like spider mite damage, but that's an early warning, and it could be corrected quickly. I like leach test, as I mentioned. Paste is listed in literature, but that's one of the easiest ones. Just leach and keep some records. This is at Sharon Stepnick. AGGA Greenhouse is taken in 2012. Shelley, I forgot, she has passed away, unfortunately, but very dedicated worker. She developed cancer, and I visited her in Greenhouse Hospital. But she was a master in checking the pH of dedicated. She has a cart and few categories she will monitor in, and we could manage crop pretty nicely. pH in hanging basket could give you a warning pretty quickly. The upper leaf turning yellow. Know the starting pH of the mix you are using. Add additional potassium bicarbonate at 1 pound per cubic foot of the growing media. This is for bedding plants, or you can apply to the growing media at 1 pound per 100 gallon, 1 gram per liter before transplanting. If it happens when plants are in late April, early May, then use of ammonium-based fertilizer once or twice will also help. Dolopril, just to show that dolomite lime is used in many cases, and they are slow release, but they do provide some calcium. Overuse, in this case, a grower used pH of 9. So we always try to stay pH of 8 at 1 gram per liter. So damage was done, physical damage is not a root damage. The pH did come up, but because at 2 grams per liter, which is in the literature, it really, EC becomes very high and could damage the plant. So pH influencer, growing media, quality, quantity of lime added, fertilizer, acid, alkaline, calcium carbonate equivalent is given on every label. Fertilizer frequency of application, higher ammonium, nitrogen, more acidic, high nitrate, nitrogen, more alkaline, water alkalinity, plant themselves change as the root decay, mature, they cause acidity, roots growth causes alkalinity, not alkalinity, but basicity, call it, I guess. So this is a quick table. High pH indicator. I talked of Bacopa, Caliproca, Dianthus, Nemesia, Pansy, Petunias. They are high pH will cause iron deficiency. SNAP, Verbenas, Vinca, and others, they will show iron and manganese toxicity, including geraniums. Sorry, correct me. These are all high pH category. So, and then this category is geranium of all types, Lysianthus, marigold, New Guinea impatient, pentas. They're all in the category of low pH iron manganese toxicity. This is the standard table. You have seen it many a time. Low pH affects plant duty and uptake. Nitrogen relatively stable. Phosphorus pH going over 7.58 start showing deficiency. Potassium is pretty stable. Calcium is extreme. Uptake here, sulfur. But look at the iron. The moment the pH start going over 7, you start deficiency. Manganese the same way. Boron goes down as well. Copper, zinc the same way, but then they get stable. So this table is a very useful one to have.
So can you go back to it for a minute, Mirza? So for those who have not seen this table before, the wider the line is in the more uptake of that particular element will happen. So if it's a really narrow line, then there's not much uptake. So if you look and you kind of try to make the averages, then you should be at a pH range of 6 to 6.5, because that's where most of the lines are the widest.
And also on the right side, you'll see on a water culture hydroponic system, many growers have floating hydroponic systems. Look at the nitrogen. The pattern is different than the soilless based system. So nitrogen has a good absorption here, pH of 5, narrow down a little bit here. Look at the phosphorus uptake, 6.0. It start even before 5.5. It start going less uptake. Potassium same way, calcium. So this is a useful table. Manganese, look at that. Suddenly it start higher absorption, more absorption right here. So yeah, so do pay attention if you're growing water culture. That's where the chelates come in. They're more stable for in pH. In hydroponic system, we prefer to use chelated.
So Mirza, what you're saying is in a water system, your pH actually runs lower than in a soil-based media.
Exactly, yeah. So they will tolerate 5.5 to 5.8 range. That's generally I recommend. But the moment you start going up, look at manganese uptake, weirdly start going around 6, 5.5. Yeah. So it's just paying attention to this one. So some practical importance that iron deficiency, manganese deficiency, boron and zinc toxicity could occur. So this is a hanging basket. The date is 24th, 2012. Sales are on. The basket is what 29.30. So I'm giving you an advanced slide so that you are aware what could happen. Because if you have planted geraniums with Michael, is that lobelia or what is the plant?
I think so. Yeah, that's lobelia, the blue one. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So two wrong complication that there are 50 baskets like that. So just be aware. Use that table and your own experience to prepare the hanging baskets. People could guess is there too much water, too much fertilizer, spray damage, pH is too high. Wrong combination of plant, basically. That's what it is. Cucumber, very sensitive. This was a hydroponic culture. The pH started dropping and serious iron deficiency occurred. And the photosynthesis on these leaves reduced to 30%. So cucumber start aborting. Why half is showing these symptoms and other half this is an iron deficiency. This is in that batch of growing media. There was not proper mixing of lime. We did contact the supplier at that time, and that could happen. This is my favorite slide. Half showing that, half showing that. It just is a growing media. Once in a while it does happen. Toxicity due to pH. Geraniums, unsellable, economic loss. Look at the date picture taken May 5. Will be difficult to turn around, but the problem starting right now on your geranium. So just be aware. What is electrical conductivity? This is the ohm meter I've shown here. That's where you measure the electrical resistance. Right side is Mohs. That's not my name, Mohyuddin's chart. It is opposite of ohms, MHOs. So having a good meter is a good investment. Millimos, millisiemens, microsiemens, they are measured. What is the principle? Electrical conductivity does not run through. Basically, electrical current doesn't run through distilled water. It needs soluble salt there. So higher the conductivity, higher the fertilizer. Management depends on the light intensity. If light is very high, we like to keep the EC below 2. In cucumber, vegetable crop is well defined in winter and in spring and summer. In bedding plant, because is a one season. So generally EC will be more 2.5, 2.8 in that range. Going over 3 could have some problem with some crops. Oh, this one already did it. Understanding EC does not show which nutrient is high. So EC does not tell you, but primarily it is the chloride and the sulfate and nitrate which contribute to high electrical conductivity.
And that's why it's important to do a water sample, because if you knew you had high sodium, then you know that
Exactly.
the EC is made up mostly, then the number is mostly made up out of the sodium compound.
Exactly.
And if you have hard water, then you know the EC would be made up out of the calcium and the magnesium in your water sample.
Yeah. And this recommendation, first find out what is the EC of your growing media. You don't need to do every batch, but a couple of times, companies try their best to keep it as uniform as possible. But because the peak mass could come from different sources, I have seen in cocoa media coming from Sri Lanka, different batches, different treatment, all they mix it differently. If your growing media has an EC value of 1.5, then don't start fertilizer for 1 to 2 weeks. This is based on, Michael, that when we worked with Daniel Fertilizer at that time, so this is my recommendation, that start feeding when there's evidence of slight nutrient starvation. In this way, roots become pretty more efficient. And nitrogen is the first. So when you see slight nitrogen deficiency, some lower leaves turning slightly yellow, that will be a good time to feed. But if you're happy with your current recommendation, please don't change. Okay. EC values for bedding plants using 20-20-20, 20-10-20, 15.50, EC between 1.5 and 2. With the nature source, it will be lower. With 5-6-27 fertilizer, generally lower values will be there. Constant feed versus pulse feeding, your choice. Constant feed, some leaching is required. I recommend that 2 feed, 1 leach is a good practice. A leach EC not over maximum 3. Concluding remarks, problems develop due to different reasons. Be aware of that. Don't blame one factor. Don't blame Dr. Mirza, Michael, our professional gardener, or anybody. Different reason. We have seen on Greenhouse Chat some situation where one grower complained, wrong fertilizer, Dr. Mirza gave a wrong recommendation. And it turned out when Michael went and investigated, their furnace was leaky. So don't jump too fast. Climate has a major role to play in diagnosing and solving problems. pH is the most important factor in plant health management. Thank you for your patience. I'll stop sharing.
This ties in the fertilizer types that you showed. This ties in with the question that I got.
Yeah.
The regarding nature source, and the nature source is a concentrated liquid plant food that is organic based. It's not certified organic, but it's organic based. And there is a couple of companies that sell a different type of organic based fertilizers or liquid plant food.
Right, yeah.
And in our case, we use and sell Nature Source, which is in a concentrated form, comes in 4.7 gallons, or it comes in a 55-gallon drum. And the recommendation that Mirza and I came up with is that for everything that is small enough that it's before transplanting, should get a rate of 125 milliliters per liter, which is 1 milliliter of concentrate per liter. And then after transplanting, which is when most people get their seedlings and their plugs, and they put them in hanging baskets or pots, then they can go to a rate of 250 parts per million, which is 2 milliliters per liter. But in addition, under low light conditions, with the type of fertilizer that Nature Source is, it has an elevated amount of ammonium nitrate. So to offset that, for two reasons, we use calcium nitrate in either a second barrel or in a system. So if you use Nature Source and at say 250 parts per million, then the calcium nitrate should be 77 grams in 100 liters of 15.500. And those two combinations give the plant the strength from the calcium, under low light conditions, as well as an increased amount of nitrogen, which together with the ammonium nitrate, makes a very nice nitrogen balance. And most growers will use Nature Source up till about the 10th to the 15th of April. It kind of depends on the weather. Then after the 15th of April, plants are strong enough and light is strong enough that just Nature Source at 250 parts per million is adequate. And the growers that so that is for a good growing mix, and at AGGA Greenhouses we've used that formulation for many years, since well over 10 years that we've used that. And together with all the other things, proper water and pH of your soil, it's worked very well for us. We have some growers that will ask if it solves any water issues, and it doesn't. The only thing that it does is we have some growers who have borderline water. They have a fair amount. They have an elevated amount of sodium, and they do need to do a fair amount of leaching to flush out the sodium when they're fertilizing. Now with the Nature Source or any other brand of liquid plant food and an elevated amount of sodium, you do not have to leach anymore. And that's because the organic-based fertilizer, the liquid plant food, is a non-salt-based fertilizer. So it's derived from the husks of canola and soya beans, and there's no other salts added. So what that means is that your EC will be a little bit lower, like Mirza said, compared to what you're used to, but you're still feeding enough nutrients to the plant. Now, for the growers who only have one injector, and they say, like, oh, I don't have an A and a B tank. We heard Dr. Matthew Krause talk about A and a B tank, and if you have two injectors, you can use one for the calcium nitrate and one for the Nature Source. And because you cannot mix in a concentrated form, you cannot mix calcium nitrate and any other kind of general plant food together. It will precipitate out. So that's why you have to keep those two separate, so that they work together in a diluted form. So if you were using a water tank and you were just using fill that up with water and add the fertilizer to it, then it works. Then you can add the calcium nitrate and the Nature Source all together in the same barrel, in the same tank, but not when you're using an injector.
Thanks, Michael.
So,
and that reminds me that 5627 professional garden fertilizer, it has got some organic thing, and it has got magnesium and all the trace element, and I have not seen any deficiency yet in bedding plant growers. So each fertilizer, you should know the use. And I remember few years ago with Michael, 2014, I guess, I asked him to get some money and do some study. So with the Crazy, we did some study too, exactly because they don't recommend calcium, with nature source. So that's why we have to develop that, and occasional deficiency. But with the 5-6-27 and calcium at those fixed rate, yeah, it's performed pretty good because it has got a plus factor, which is a type of seaweed extract, which PG never tells me secret. Although I'm her brother, but never tells me the secret, trade secret. So yeah, so using fertilizer requires all the knowledge, ammonium, nitrogen, ratios, potassium. But to convince people that fertilizer has to be managed. And I remember with cannabis, the old thinking was, this is a week 1 veg formula, week 2, week 3, every week has a different formula. They took all the things and then combined them together. So when I tell them it's just one formula which I'm going to use, and they scratch their head and don't believe me until they see the results. So knowledge of fertilizer labels, we'll keep on discussing this topic actively, because as we start growing plants, we will see how plants are performing. And so this will be a discussion subject many times.
Yes,
Michael, you
it's
have some?
growing plants is a matter of making lots of decisions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Michael, do you have something to share, or should we call off?
No, we've been kind of busy, and we knew that we had some presenters.
Okay.
So like I said in the beginning, our March is like everybody else's May. So last week was kind of like Mother's Day. This week is a little bit slower, but next week will be like the long weekend of May. So we will be sending out lots of plant material over the next, starting last week, over the next 5-6 weeks. So so I'll send some more pictures, another time, but not now.
But how about all those unrooted cutting we saw in your greenhouse? They are now good plugs right now, right?
Yeah, so the amount of unrooted cuttings that arrive every week is severely diminishing. 2 weeks ago, we planted 91,000 cuttings. Last week, we planted 45,000 cuttings. This week, it's half of that, about 25,000 cuttings. And, then it just kind of goes down.
Right.
So the cuttings you saw, most of those have been moved out of those areas into areas where there's no bottom heat, and the roots can continue to develop, and to also make room for new cuttings to arrive, on in the same space. Yeah. So
Michael, go ahead and thanks everybody. And
Mirza, Matt and Megan said, what soil would you recommend for cactus?
Oh, good question. I don't know about cactus. Michael, you tell me.
Well, like a light mix with some sand, is fine. But we grew some cactus that we got as tissue culture, as a calloused cactus cutting, if you believe it. We got those in, and we used regular growing mix. And the trick is to keep the cactus dry. Not super important, what kind of soil mix do you use. I mean, I'm sure that there is people who have cactus mix and who have succulent mix, but we find them on a commercial scale. If you back off on the water, then your cactus will do fine with any kind of regular growing mix from Sungrow or Premier or whoever else is your favorite soil supplier. And they will, just keep it on the dry side.
Absolutely. Good answer.
Can I ask a quick question before we conclude?
Yes, Simon, go ahead.
So from your presentation, Dr. Mirza, you had a couple slides with some cukes showing some damping off. I'm just going to share my screen really quickly. If you could just enable a screen share, I want to run a couple photos past you while we have your expert eyes here.
I'll do that. Yeah.
I kind of typed. We'll see what Simon shares.
Says host has disabled participant screen sharing.
Yeah, are you able to see it?
No, you'll Simon has some pictures he'd like to show. So if you
Okay,
can give
okay.
him
Oh, he wants to
permission.
show, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, let me see if, are you able to share or I should,
Not yet.
okay, let me just go to the participant and, okay.
So
let's
these
go.
photos
Okay,
I got from a grower today.
good, sure. Okay, please go ahead.
Perfect. So these are from a brand new grower.
Mhm.
It's their second year in production.
Oh, boy. Ah,
And you can see, yeah, it's an oh boy situation because these are freshly transplanted, and these guys, like, to their credit, they had a fantastic first season. I was so impressed with how they did.
yeah,
Unfortunately, the cucumber area of their greenhouse here, you can see, as a more zoomed in photo here, very,
yeah,
very stressed out plants. And what I think is the biggest indicator of what the problem is here is you can see on this photo,
yeah,
there's
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
not much left of this stem. I assume this is damping off. Do we know, can we say based on these photos, is this Pythium or Fusarium, or do we need to
Yeah,
actually have some samples sent into a lab?
It's more Fusarium. Yeah.
Okay.
It's more Fusarium. It will turn pink a little bit later. Yeah, Pythium generally won't allow the plant to go that high. So it is a Fusarium wilt type.
Okay, and that's what's causing all the issues with nutrient uptake and why
Absolutely.
we're seeing such
And
poor.
also, you know, I don't know what sort of, any idea what's the pH and EC on these leaves?
Yes.
No?
So pH was 6.0, EC was 2.0. So
Okay. And is the
yeah,
balanced one? There was a reasonable phosphorus in the program.
so they're using, I believe they're actually using the vegetable formula you just mentioned from Professional Gardener.
Okay.
A blended fertilizer with some calcium nitrate, I think.
Yeah. So likely, I think there was the infection is causing, because these Fusarium will stop the xylem to uptake the nutrients. So that's what is happening.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So right. So when you have an issue this bad, I think generally the right strategy is to plant again, because these plants are probably not recovering from this level of stress.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's great. I'll share. He's not on the call today, but I'll share it with him. It's a grower out in Regina Beach. So I thought I'd just because we're on the topic, I thought I'd run it past you. So I appreciate that.
Perfect. No, that's great. That is, yeah. Those diseases could have been solved much earlier, you know, before.
Yes.
There is for bedding plant growers who use soil. There is a surefire way to tell if you have Pythium before it migrates, you know, up on the stem, like you were showing on the cucumber plant.
Absolutely.
And I have to add a little story. Many years ago, there used to be open house at CDC North, or the tree nursery at that time, and we were waiting for supper to start, and Mirza played a little video of a houseplant question that somebody had, and they brought this houseplant in very dramatically on a stretcher, you know, and there was all kinds of hoopla around it, and Mirza featured as the expert in this video.
In this lab coat.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they used all kinds of things. It was quite a funny thing. I don't know if it still exists, but anyway, Mirza diagnosed that this plant had Pythium because it had been under stress. You know, like you said, high moisture, cold temperatures. You know, these are all reasons to get Pythium, which is mostly the case. Low light, which is mostly the case in the wintertime. But I will never forget how Mirza identified the fact that this plant had Pythium. He took the root between his thumb and his index finger, squeezed a little bit, and pulled, and the exo separated from the endo. So we were left with a thin thread, and he was able to with thinly, you know, move the outside part of the root away. So if you wonder if you have Pythium in any plant and you see a non-white, so a clear water looking type of root, you know, that is not nice and white, and you put it between your index finger and your thumb and slightly rub and it separates, that's a surefire way of telling that you have Pythium. And
Because you have great memory.
well, I learned it many years ago, and I still apply that technique. If I'm wondering if I have Pythium, then that's what I use. And growers
that video was so dramatic that it won some award as well. It
did.
Atrium with Alberta Agriculture.
Yeah, you did win some awards. So you'll have to dig that out one day, Mirza, if you still have it.
Absolutely.
So anyway,
thank you,
everybody. Thank you so much for your attention. We enjoy doing this. Simon, thank you for bringing the guests with you. That was phenomenal. In 2 weeks, we have Connie Brad from AMA Plastics, you know, and whoever else we can you know, we can put in there. Bring your questions, you know, because by now everybody should have their greenhouse going and should have some plants in there. Like Simon did, we can easily share, you know, a picture from your greenhouse if you have any questions. So, but for now, have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you very much. Take care.
We'll see you again.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night.